I do hope that you appreciate our song leaders and that you let them know how much you appreciate them, because if they didn't lead songs, you would have to. So you might want to think about that. So be grateful. They do put a lot of effort into the songs, and they have to get those songs to us early so we can get them up on the PowerPoint. And of course, this evening, Jerry Eccles was supposed to lead songs, and he got sick. You probably noticed he wasn't here, and Vance was good enough to step up in a day's notice and to do that for us. Did a wonderful job. Thank you, brother. And all of our song leaders do a great job. I'm really proud of all of them. We'll be in 2 Peter chapter 3, if you'd like to find that. I look around, I see a lot of you who are here this morning. You're back this evening to hear me preach again. I don't understand you people. I don't know what's wrong with you, but here you are. And this is the second half. Some of you were not here, and so I'm going to review. I normally don't do this, and if you're watching this on YouTube or something, and you may want to go back and watch the first lesson so you'll understand this better, but we've talked today about the correlation between the ark, Noah's ark, and the church. And we talked about how the ark is really a type of the church. The church is the antitype, if you're familiar with that terminology. And so we looked at 8 points this morning. I'm just going to run through those real quickly. You can fill in your blank if you didn't have these filled in. Number 1, there was only one ark. And in the same way, there is only today one church. And then we talked about number 2, the ark had to be built specifically the way God instructed. He had very specific way that he wanted that built. In the same way, if we alter God's design for the church, it is no longer his church. And then number 3, those who entered the ark did so of their own free will. And of course, the same is with the church as well. Number 4, there was safety only on the ark. You had to stay on the ark. The same way there is safety only in the church. And then this morning we talked about number 5, only a few entered the ark. There were 8 in all, 1 Peter 3:20. In the same way, only a few enter the church, Matthew 7:14. Number 6, there was only one door into the ark. And in the same way, there is only one way into the church. Number 7, those in the ark were all in one family. And the same is true at the church. We are brothers and sisters of one family. And finally, number 8, those in the ark were removed from sin through water. I'll not explain all that again. You can watch the video. But in the church, our sin is removed through the water of baptism. So we looked at 8 parallels with the ark and the church this morning. We're going to look at 8 more tonight. We're going to start with number 9. And you know the neat thing about a lesson like this is I'm pretty sure I didn't get all of them. In fact, I'm going to mention another one tonight that I didn't get. I'm going to add that in. You may think of others as well, and if you do, I would love it if you would share that with me. Just some parallels as you think about Noah and his family and the ark and how that parallels with the New Testament church. It's just a neat thing to study and to talk about. So, all right. So with that in mind, let's look at number 9. The ark carried Noah's family to a purified earth. In the same way, the church carries us to our perfect heavenly home. When we look at the way that the world was before the flood came, where every thought, the intent of every thought was only evil all the time. It was a corrupt and terrible world. And God commissioned Noah to build the ark. As the flood came in, it lifted him and his family away from that terrible, sinful world. And when the ark rested on Mount Ararat, when it came back down, the world was without sin. It was crisp, it was clean, everything was new. They got a fresh start. In the same way, we in the church get to experience a new start. We get to be born again when we come into the church. And this church, this vessel, and remember, it's not a building, it is the people that we're part of, but this is taking us to a pure and a perfect place where there will be no selfish people. There'll be no more tears. There'll be no more crying, no more sadness. A place where we will get to be with God for eternity. Number 10, only believers were in the ark. And in the same way, only believers are in the church. Now I'm going to add that one that I thought of actually this afternoon as I was kind of looking back through some old sermons, and just a couple of weeks ago, I preached on those who are not, some are not far from the kingdom. Remember that a couple of weeks ago? I preached on that. And I got to thinking, I wonder if there were people who lived close to the ark. You think about it. I bet there were. I mean, the thing was huge. You had to seen it from a long ways off. And I bet there were people who were close to the ark, close enough to actually see it. No doubt Noah and his family had talked to them, explained why they were building the ark. They probably asked, what's the idea here? And maybe they believed a little bit. Maybe they thought, well, you know, that's possible. But they weren't in the ark, they were close to it. And in the same way, we have people that are near the church, but they're not in. And of course, our responsibility, brothers and sisters, is to urge them to come on in to the kingdom. But only believers were on the ark. There was nobody on the ark saying, I don't think this is going to work. You know, this is not the place to be. Nobody on the ark like that. Now, I don't know that all of them had as strong a faith as Noah did. I don't know if his sons were as strong in their faith, but they had enough faith to get on the ark, didn't they? So they had that much. In the same way, only believers are in the church. Let's look at number 11. The ark was laughed at, and it seemed irrelevant before the flood. In the same way, the church seems irrelevant before the judgment. In 2 Peter chapter 3, starting in verse 3, says, we know first of all that in the last days mockers will come with their mocking, following after their own lust, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For ever since the fathers fell asleep, all continues just as it was from the beginning of creation. For when they maintain this, it escapes their notice. That's a politically correct way of saying, you dummies. It escapes their notice that by the word of God, the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water and by water, through which the world at that time was destroyed, being flooded with water. And we know what that's referring to. Referring to the great flood. Peter says, you need to know there's going to be mockers, and they're going to come mocking. You know, it's always been that way, hasn't it? I mean, from the very beginning of the church, there have always been mockers. There will always be mockers of the church. Following their own lust, he says. That means they're doing what they want to do. They're eating, they're drinking, they're marrying, they're doing things. They're just going on as if nothing is going to happen. They're living their lives as if Jesus is not going to return. And I hope you don't live that way. Do you? Do you live in such a way that you really can't even tell by watching you live and by the decisions that you make that the Lord is going to return someday? You know, we mock atheists and unbelievers? Because they live that way. Because they don't believe. But if you act that way, you may not be an intellectual atheist, but you're a practical atheist. What's the difference? Really, what's the difference? In the end, what is the difference between the two? We need to make sure we live in such a way that we are showing with our life, we believe our Lord is returning someday, and we are preparing for that. They go on acting as if the world's going to go on forever. It's not. The world exists today and has made it this far only because God allows it to. That is the only reason this world is still here today. God destroyed the people of the entire world in Noah's day. Wiped out the whole thing. And he's going to do it again. But the next time, there's going to be nothing left. Now, I didn't want to read verse 10 because I just used this a few weeks ago in a sermon, but I changed my mind. Okay, we're going to read verse 10. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10 says, "But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up." That means none of this physical stuff that is here is going to exist when the Lord returns. It's all going to be gone. And I know that flies right in the face of a lot of church doctrines. There's a lot of people that say, no. I studied with a guy, and he honestly believed that when the Lord returns, he is going to stay on the earth. He believed only a few get to go to heaven. He wasn't one of the few, but he's going to stay on the earth. I studied with another guy who believed that Jesus is coming back and he's going to reign on the earth for 1,000 years, and we're going to have 1,000 years to get right with God if we didn't do it yet. Wrong. That is wrong. When the Lord returns, that's it. It says the elements, doesn't it? The elements will be destroyed with intense heat. Am I reading that wrong? That's exactly what he says. He says it again in verse 12. The elements are going to be destroyed. This physical world will not exist anymore. And we ought to live like that. Like we understand that that's the way it's going to be. You know, I get things like this that I put up here on the screen. I get these emails and texts from people all over. During COVID, Satan really did his job, didn't he? I mean, I hate Satan, but I got to tip my hat. With COVID, wow, he really did a job. And he has convinced so many people that they don't need to go to church in order to be church. They can sit in their pajamas in the living room and watch it on TV, and that's fine. I didn't use one of mine because you would try to figure out who it was, so I found this one on the internet. I'm a relatively new believer. Initially only listened to online sermons, and later on had been attending a local church since the end of 2019. Skipped a part there. The church is also advocating that we should go to the church instead of just attending online sermons. Did you catch that? I'm attending. I'm just attending online sermons. I am doubting the importance of whether attending church is really needed as a Christian. I don't know if this guy's listening to what he just said. He says, do we really have to attend? Because I'm attending, but I'm not attending. I don't know what he means by attending here. He's asking the question, do I really have to go down to the church building? Do I have to assemble with the Christians to be part of the church? I can answer that real easy. Yes, of course you do. There is no way that sitting at home, watching on TV, that you are engaged in worship. The very word church, ecclesia, means those who are called out. That word in secular writing is actually used in a military setting, and it means to fall in. And if you have any military background at all, you know what fall in means. When your drill sergeant leans in the barracks and says fall in, you got about 20 seconds to be out the door and standing in formation and ready to march. It means get in position and get ready to be the army of God. You cannot be part of the church without being part of the church. How do we speak to one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs when you're singing to a TV set? It's not the same. Now, I understand there's some who physically cannot get out. And I said this a couple of weeks ago, I'm going to say it again. God understands in that situation, and certainly it's better to watch it on TV than nothing. I'll grant you that. But if you could physically be there and you don't, just because you would rather sit at home and sip your hot cocoa and eat marshmallows and pause it when you want to go do something else, that's not worship. We assemble to worship. We take the Lord's Supper together. How do you do that sitting at home? Oh, well, we had some crackers and grape juice. We did. No, we do this as a body. We do it together. That's what God commissioned. I'm telling you, Satan did his job. He did his job well with COVID. And there's some who still have that mentality. But no, we need to be the church. We need to be assembled together. That's God's will, that we be together. All right, number 12. The ark was built for those who believed and obeyed God's promise. And the same thing is true with the church. We'll go back to 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell, and committed them to pits of darkness reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world for the ungodly. And if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to destruction by reducing them to ashes, having made them an example to those who live ungodly lives thereafter, and if he rescued righteous Lot, oppressed by the sensual conduct of the unprincipled men, for by what he saw and heard, that righteous man, while living among them, felt his righteous soul tormented day after day by their lawless deeds. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from temptation, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment for the day of judgment. Surely a loving God's not going to send me to hell. Have you ever heard that one? You think Peter ever heard that one? I bet he did. I bet Peter heard somebody say, well, no, surely you keep preaching about this God and he's going to come in judgment. He's going to send people to hell. Surely he's not going to send me to hell. And I could just hear Peter answering it this way. He didn't spare the angels, did he? What did he do with them? He didn't spare the entire world in the days of Noah, did he? He didn't spare Sodom and Gomorrah, did he? You know, the wonder is not that God would send us to hell. The real surprise is that he would allow any of us to go to heaven. That's the shocker. We are so undeserving of his immense grace. We forget how good God is. He is so loving, so forgiving of us. We don't deserve that. He gives it to us anyway. That's what grace means. And I love verse 9, don't you? God knows how to rescue the godly from temptation. The Lord knows. He knows how to do that. He's pretty good at it. We can trust him. He knows how, but he also knows how to punish those who are corrupt, who choose not to do the will of God. Let's look at the 13th one. God provided the ark to protect people and to be lived in. He intended as he was having Noah build the ark, that's where you're going to be living. And they lived there quite a while. God's church protects us from the storms of life. And we are clothed and fed here. Right here, we are clothed and fed. You ask, well, how are we clothed? Well, Galatians chapter 3, verse 27 says, for all of you who are baptized in Christ Jesus have clothed yourself with Christ. That's all the clothes I need. Would you agree with that? If I'm clothed with, that's all I need right there. And I receive that right here. Are we fed? Well, Revelation chapter 2, verse 7 says, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. We are clothed here. We are fed here. We have everything that we need in the church. The ark was totally self-sustained. They had to live there. They had to bring the food in with them in the ark. They slept there. They got their exercise there. Taking care of all those animals. I'm sure they got a lot of exercise. In the same way, the church is fully self-sustainable. This is all I need, is the church. It has everything that I'm looking for. I don't have to go outside to the world for anything. It's all right here. I have a kind of a side note here. When our older boys, when they were young, Kathy and I and our two oldest boys, we built an ark replica together. And I want to suggest this as a family project. I know I've been talking a lot about family lately, but this would be another good thing to do. Think about this. With your family, build a replica of the ark. Now, I looked online, and you can get these little dinky things that you just snap together. You can go that way if you want, but we built ours from scratch, and ours was nearly 4 feet long when we got done with it. And we had so much fun doing that, and we really went back and looked at the passage and talked about, well, now where would you put the hippos and the elephants, and where would you need a lot of fresh water, and we built these little water tank things in there and put that in there and the little pens, and where would the birds go? Because the birds were on the ark. And we had a little bird sanctuary. It's just a neat thing to do as a family. And so you might want to think about doing that as a little family project. All right. Number 14. The ark was absolutely necessary because of the flood. In the same way, the church is absolutely necessary because judgment is coming. If there were no flood, the ark would be ridiculous. It would serve no purpose. 100 years building this huge box, and then no flood comes, well, that would be really crazy. That'd be worthless. Same thing is true with the church. I mean, if Jesus is not returning, we are silly. We are above all people to be most pitied, as 1 Corinthians 15 says. Not talking about the same thing, but we, the church, exist because judgment is coming. We understand that. Number 15. Those who waited till the flood started before they came into the ark, they waited too long. If you wait until the Lord returns, it will be too late. In Luke chapter 17. Luke 17, verse 26, if you read that with me, please. And just as it happened in the days of Noah. Have you noticed how many times the New Testament talks about Noah and the flood? Have you picked up on that today? A lot of times it's referenced. As it happened in the days of Noah, so it will be also in the days of the Son of Man. They were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, they were being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. In Noah's day, they were just going on like, yeah, well, he said this was going to happen, and maybe they might have believed it at first, but then day after day, month after month, year after year, no flood, nothing happens. And they just going back to living however they were going to live. And then, boom, the day of the flood. They're like, ah, it's real. And Jesus says, that's exactly how it's going to be when I return. People say, oh, what? It's the mockers, again in 2 Peter. The mockers saying, where is this coming? That you keep saying Jesus is coming. I don't see him. Our fathers, they heard that too. Their fathers heard that. No, Jesus is not coming. That's what the mockers say. And they're going to say that right up to the time that the judgment happens. And then they're going to go, oh no. Too late then. It's too late then. Today is the day of salvation. Today is the time. And you could choose not to believe this if you want. You have that free will. But Jesus said he's going to return for his bride. He says right here, he's describing his coming. He's going to be back. And he's going to destroy the world. But it's up to you to decide whether you believe it or not. Number 16. The only way to be saved from the flood was to get in the ark and to stay in the ark. And in the same way, the only way to be free from sin is to get in the church and to stay in the church. Can you imagine those who got on that ark, and after a few days, maybe they're getting a little cabin fever, they've been in there quite a while, they say, I'm getting off the ark. Not a good idea. Not very bright. Think about what the world was like that. I mean, now you had to stay on the ark. The same thing is true with the church. Once we come in, brother and sister, we need to stay in. And we need to encourage one another. Do you know somebody who is maybe thinking about leaving the church right now? Maybe they're kind of right on the cusp and they're really struggling in their faith. We need to encourage them. Don't get off the ship. This is the only boat afloat. That's the only place where there's safety. We get in the church and we stay in the church, and that's what it's all about. Again, if you think of any others, the parallels between the ark and the church, I hope you'll talk to me, email me, call me. I'd love to talk more about this. I love studying the Bible. It's just so encouraging. So much to learn. So many great things the Word of God says. We're going to sing an invitation song. We're done with the sermon. Walking Alone at Eve is our message, and we're going to sing about that. If there's something heavy on your heart, you're needing prayers, go ahead and come to the front, and we'll pray for you. Please